Today it's your day, man.
Thank
happy,
you,
no?
thank you.
And,
I'm happy.
your Viva after a long wait, you know.
Okay, and you want to help me to take some movies?
I congratulate you in advance.
Thank
Inshallah,
you
it will
very
be a
much.
success, inshallah.
Thank you.
From the first year, maybe 40 students.
Very good morning to all of you. On behalf of the Department of Studies in English and Board of Studies in English, I welcome all of you today for PhD Viva Voce of Mr. Seyed Mohammad Hassan Hoseini. Hoseini's thesis on effectiveness of cooperative learning methods, a study with Iranian and Indian undergraduate learners. I take this as an opportunity to invite Dr. Shrina, Director Vanilota, Dr. R. Ramchandra, and also the teachers from the Mandya Center, the English teachers from the Mandya Center who have come here today to be present for the last the students' PhD biology. I now request the candidate to make a presentation for 15 or 15 minutes. Okay, and before that, Dr. Dasan will be speaking to you about where his candidates work. Thank you.
Professor Seyed Mohammad, Chairperson of the Department, Chairperson of Board of Studies, Professor Malik, Board of Examining, Professor Srina, on the Faculty of English, Professor Ramchandra, and the same family. Dear Subramanian, Vijay, Kiran, I don't know the other teachers of the present, Subramanian, Yaramaya, other friends, and my dear students. This is a very significant memorable moment, both for the candidate and also for the guidance. Because this happens to be the first appearance of the student under my guidance, and is also a student from out of the country, and he is one of the few providing this from our department. The candidate, Seyed Mohammad Hassan Hoseini.
Thank you very much for taking the invitation, and thank you, Professor. We will go ahead and which will never be able to perform such a daunting task, and thank you all for your attendance. Okay, the title of my thesis was Effectiveness of Cooperative Learning Methods. It was a series of Iranian Indian undergraduate learners. That was a kind of comparative experience with the. But before continuing, I need to rather have a definition of cooperative learning. What's cooperative learning? Oxford defines cooperative learning as the set of highly structured, psychologically and sociologically based techniques which mingle both cognitive and, most important of all, affective aspects of learning, and accentuates active participation of all participants in the process of learning. This is the definition for cooperative. But cooperative learning, as a general term, it refers to many strategies, many methods, as silent way as a method, direct method, random translation method. These are all methods. In the area of cooperative learning, we have also many methods. Again, before continuing, I'd like to raise another question. Why have we selected cooperative learning? That is, what is the rationale behind selecting cooperative learning? First and foremost, I was inspired by Paulo Freire's notion of education. He believes group work, cooperative learning, as a link of his strategy, but I believe it is a weapon to empower students to confront the Western hegemonic versions of globalization, which are contributing to the ongoing clash of culture, civilizations, and sometimes even religions. The next inspiration to me from a question, as an educationist, as a teacher, I'm teaching for more than 12 years, 13 years. And I'm asking myself, what are the effective mechanisms under which real learning occurs? The answer to this question led me to cooperative learning. What are the mechanisms under which effective learning occurs? Effective, especially language learning. Okay, number one. When the affective filters of students are low, effective learning is most probably to occur. Number two. When the input is sufficient, and most important of all, is comprehensive. Number three. When students are motivated. Most important again, when students are engaged. This is the key to learning, to effective learning. When students are engaged in the process of learning. And in language classes again, when they are exposed to language. When they have positive values towards the language learning, towards the environment. These are all the major factors. We have seen a number of researchers on each of which affect effective learning. So cooperative learning focuses on these crucial areas. So this was the second major inspiration for me to focus on cooperative learning. When you look in the area of cooperative learning, we have two extremes. On the one hand, we have the cooperative learning methods that focus on or prioritize pure cooperation. That is, teachers are supposed to encourage students, team members, to cooperate with team members and at the same time with other team members in the class. But on the other extreme, we have methods that the advocates of which encourage students to cooperate with their team members, but at the same time compete or lie against other team members in other teams in the class. I myself developed an approach, I call it competitive team-based learning. And when I went through the related literature, I noticed a number of positive effects for the cooperative learning methods in comparison with traditional lecture methods. But researchers done for comparison of these two extremes very little. And so we focus on this area. So this is the focus to see the effectiveness of these two extremes, these two cooperative learning methods, namely cooperative team-based learning and competitive team-based learning on, number one, building comprehension abilities of students. Number two, their attitudes towards language learning and the learning environments. Number three, on the language learning strategies. Number four, on the retention of information. Based on these objectives, two hypotheses were developed. This thesis consisted of 6 chapters. The first chapter was an introduction to the scope of the study. In this chapter we try to prioritize the significance of cooperation and collaboration in today's world context, and then we went through the related literature and then the objectives and hypotheses of this. The second chapter was on theoretical basis or cornerstones of cooperative learning. You know, as you said, effective learning occurs on certain mechanisms, and there are certain theories and hypotheses in education in general and in the PhD in particular that focus on these areas. So the second chapter focuses on these areas to justify the significance of cooperative learning in relation to these theories and hypotheses posed by some experts and specialists in the field. The third chapter was in the cooperative learning methods. In this chapter, which I myself tried to develop a book out of chapter 3 of my thesis only. The book is ready, it is in my bag for publication. On chapter 3. The third chapter focuses on comparison of introduction to cooperative learning methods and then comparing the cooperative learning methods. The fourth chapter, which was the heart of the thesis, was methodology. In this chapter, we try to shed light on the design of the study and then on the procedure we adapted in the course of developing the thesis. We talked about how we gathered the students, what were the instructional tools, and what were the tests, and so forth. The fifth chapter deals with the results of the study, and the final chapter, the sixth chapter, was an interpretation of the results and findings of the study. 192 students participated in this study. 96 from Al First Grade College of Mysore and 96 from Mashhad Azad University. The classes in each country, each group of 96 students were divided based on their scores on the reading test, which was gathered through conducting an IELTS test. The group in each country was divided to 3 groups of 32 each. One was the control group and 2 were the experimental groups. In the control group, the students experienced traditional chalk and chalk system, teacher advantage system. But in the 2 cooperative learning methods, in one experimental group, they experienced pure cooperative learning developed by Johnson & Johnson and Johns Hopkins University in the United States. They were encouraged to purely cooperate with not only with their team members, but also with the members of other teams in the class. But in the other class, we conducted my own method, competitive team-based method. We encourage students to cooperate with their team members, but compete against other team members. Regarding the statistical techniques applied to the study, repeated measure angle was applied to see the significance of the differences between changes post-graph retest to post-test situations. Then one-way angle was conducted to see which method was the best. And when the F-test showed significance, we applied the Sheffer post-graph test to see which mean score was the most significant to select to decide on the most effective method regarding the individual objectives of the study. The findings were of 2 kinds. So first we found that cooperative learning methods, the 2 methods we applied, serve to widen, to increase the reading comprehension abilities of the students, number 1. Number 2, compared to traditional lecture method. Number 2, they serve to widen the students' strategies, repertoire of language learning strategies. Number 3, they serve to increase their positive attitudes, widen their positive attitudes towards the language learning and learning environments, the methods applied. And number 4, they serve to better improve retention abilities of our students compared to the students in traditional lecture methods. But in more detail, we found that it was cooperative team-based learning which increased the reading comprehension abilities of our students. But it was competitive team-based learning that contributed to the development of the language learning strategies, especially the metacognitive skill strategies and affective strategies. It was also competitive team-based learning that contributed to the improvement of the retention abilities of the students. And we found that cooperative team-based learning was more effective in Iran, but it was competitive team-based learning that was more effective in India. These were the results of the research. But before generalizing these results, we should consider the delimitations of the research. We have some delimitations of the research. And based on the results, we have recommended teachers, mostly because of the realities of this tough competitive world. Teachers are better to adapt, not adopt competitive team-based learning in the classes. And most important of all, because of the shortage of time, I have to go through the acknowledgement. Again, I said it was just because of the pure cooperation and collaboration of my teacher, dear Dr. Hassan, that was able to finalize such a, let me say, daunting task. Thank you very much again, Dr. Hassan. And of course, there were some other members, especially the head of the education department in Missouri University, some persons suffering in the statistics department of Missouri University, and especially Dr. Lancy, psychology department of Missouri University. And of course, and most important of all, I'm thankful to the members of the department of English department of Missouri University, and to all, especially to our special guests. Thank you very much.
A special word of welcome to Professor Ramchandra, who has come from the linguistics department and also a specialist in linguistics. With the permission of the chair, Professor Sunita, I would like to read the two reports that we have received from the external examiners. The first report is from the Department of English, Jawaharlal Nehru University, Center for English Studies, School of Language, Literature and Concept Studies, JNU, and the person is Professor G.J.V. Prasad. He has a very brief report. I must begin by saying that it was a pleasure to go through this dissertation. This is a well-researched study deriving data from practical exercises with 192 dummies. The strategies that can be adapted by the language teacher in ensuring that a learning environment is created in this process. And also the qualitative theory. The researcher argues strongly for mixing various method and introducing the competitiveness of the team-based method. Then he goes describing the other things. I go to the conclusion. Says, in conclusion, these chapters sets out the findings, self-reflects, evaluate, and self-reflexively evaluates them, and ends with suggestions for policymakers for the future. The findings are shown to substantiate the argument for cooperative learning methods, and the researcher traces the findings of the study in the matrix of existing scholarship and compares the results to an admirable extent. This is a strong conclusion to an extremely well-written thesis. I must end by congratulating both the researcher and the supervisor for a fine piece of doctoral dissertation. And in conclusion, we recommend that this thesis may be submitted to the university, may be recommended for the award of the degree. The second report is from Professor N. Nagaraju, Professor of English, Adi Kavi, Nannaya University, Rajahmundry, Andhra Pradesh. And this is a very brief report, but he has raised certain questions which the researcher has to clarify. The understanding to read this thesis I have chosen as it is. The thesis has 6 well-written chapters. In the first chapter, the researcher presents an overview of cooperative learning, then moves to the statement of the problem and the rationale. One of the basic assumptions that CL contributes to better information processing and acquisition of high-quality listening strategies, which have been well discussed in the thesis. In the second chapter, the focus is on what he claims as the paradigm shift, the evolution of various methods and their limitations and the theories of learning and language which underpin them are discussed. The third chapter focuses on the cooperative learning activity like three-step interview and other methods. Analysis of these methods form part of the thesis. Chapter 4 focuses exclusively on methodology. Chapter 5 and 6, which could have been formed together as a single chapter, deal with analysis, findings, summation, recommendation. In other words, the actual work done by the researcher. There's a slide that hints that the first 3 chapters are more based on the information already available, and therefore the other 3 chapters are more related to creative critical thinking. More importantly, the findings are related to objectives stated in the hypothesis, thus establishing the relevance of other sum of that. A summation of the findings thus becomes necessary. The findings are interpreted from the viewpoint of the efficiency of the traditional methods and seen as improving the net of learning strategy rather than survival skill. Then he goes on to say the competitive PhD early is useful in capacity building, arguing at the same time for the introduction of technology in the national context. 2 statements in the summation should have been qualified with a great deal of utterances that he marshals in support of his thesis. 1. That the conditions in India and Iran as far as these strategies are concerned are the same. This question in fact was raised by Professor Nade when he was submitting the pre-thesis, final thesis. And well, some extent he has revised in light of what Nade had said. And the same question has been slightly raised by the same Professor Nade. Second, CL favors meta-cognitive strategy rather than survival skills. After arguing all along the thesis that CL methods that take care of the community and social angles. This has been my problem with him, the social goals of cooperative learning, which from an Iranian context he found it difficult to assimilate in the conversation. In fact, he took 6 months time to learn what exactly Paul was speaking vis-a-vis pedagogy of the past. So there are some limitations in this regard. These minor inconsistencies apart, however, they do not take away the great merit of the researcher who has been able to bring to his work through careful planning, consistent work, cogent planning, meticulous documenting. In fact, the documenting and the appendices are long enough to cast a shadow on the text of the thesis. In fine, the understudy has no hesitation in recommending the award of privilege to the candidate. And in the consolidated report, after my preparation of the internal report, which we did to the university, basically I summarized the 2 reports that have gone, and then I put it in certain things. That the examiners observe that this thesis is a significant contribution to knowledge, as it addresses the question of new paradigm shift happening in the pedagogical approaches to teaching and learning English as a second language. He has noted how the study argues in favor of skill methods, although he has his reservations about the scholar's rationing for through competition as part of skill method. But throughout in the whole history of cooperative learning methods across the globe, competition as part of cooperative learning has been challenged by many scholars, many critics. This is one of the very few innovative ways of approaching competition as an ingredient of cooperative learning. Now, very many scholars, including the Vigatin disciples, or the Hamlet disciples, or other people like Russian and others, they all have questioned the rationale. But he has argued against that. And he says, healthy way of integrating competition in an era of globalization is a must. That he has to explain. Yet it does not prevent both of them from recommending the thesis for the award. It's important that the research scholar addresses these concerns raised by 2 examiners as and when he ventures to publish thesis in the form of a book. In case of publication, revision from the point of view of these concerns expressed by the examiners is a must. That even minor inconsistencies should mark the quality of his research. All the 3 examiners have no hesitation to recommend the thesis for the award of PhD as a research scholar deserves it or otherwise rendered written. So this is the summation of all the three reports done. Now we have examiners, experts, and we also linguistic experts and the students open for discussion. So professor and researcher in the experts. Okay? So you can answer that and then we can. Yeah. So two questions you need to answer, Mr. Hoseini. One is, how do you reconcile metacognitive strategies along with surviving skills, namely social or community goals of cognitive learning by knowledge skills? This is one question that you will answer. The second question is, to what extent competition can be a successful perennial mode of learning via CL methods, particularly when CL is seen as a social process of learning where win-win situation for all is a must. In spite of the team building, win-win situation is a must. I mean, in relation, competition is a goal, is one of the goals. Then you differentiate, grade them into different conflicts. Then you have underachievers and high achievers. How do you reconcile this? These are the two elements of the question. Ingredients of the questions are the two examples. And I have given my reservations to you already. That is already included in the first question, the social goals and all. So respond to that. After that, we will get the third question.
Thank you very much. First of all, I try to develop competitive team-based learning as a response to deficiencies and the present methods of cooperative learning. That's number one. The answer to question number one refers may be found in left segment which is field ZPD, zone of proximal development. That is, in my point of view, we use the community as an instrument to empower individuals, that's all. The community refers to the proximal development a child or a student can do without the scaffold of others. The distance between this and the proximal development he can do with the help of others, Through communities, we empower students. We enable them with the metacognitive strategies. This, I think, is not in contradiction with the major goal of cooperation. We want to empower individuals through teamwork. We want to make them work for the real world. This is very important. Pure cooperation is an idea, but in reality, in the real world, you see competition is there. So we should try to, as educationists, we should try to prepare students to enter such a tough competitive world. So competition can be included, can be injected, even in the area of cooperative learning methods. I have included competitive team-based learning. In reality, I have injected competition in the area of in situations where cooperation is encouraged to rectify the deficiencies in the present methods. Let me read from my outline what are the benefits of competitive team-based learning compared to the present methods of cooperative learning, especially compared to Johnson & Johnson method of cooperative learning. They developed cooperative team-based learning or learning together at Johns Hopkins University, but I observed a number of deficiencies in this method, an approach which has a number of estimates. What are the benefits of my method? Number one, regarding comparing to Johnson & Johnson method. It helps the best students. We have the best students in our process. Or high achievers feel satisfied and puts an end to their rejection and unwillingness to contribute their efforts in the success of their teammates. Number two, the second element of my method. Johnson & Johnson method lacked these benefits. Number two, it exalts raw performance or active participation in the class activities. Number 3, it enforces individual accountability of all group members and thus limits the scope for criminal ideas for those who return to allocate the responsibilities and each part on the local office. Number 4, it brings further opportunities for students to be more clearly aware of their capacities and capabilities in a broader sense. Number 5, it equips students for current globalized work environment, which requires workforce that's competent in skills like teamwork, conflict management, and successful collaborative or collective decision-making, and its competitive environments. Number 6, it contributes not only to a zest for true and active shared learning, but also to learn humanitarian democratic values, which in turn are favorable to the acceleration of growth and development of humane societies. So I have developed competitive team listening not to justify pure cooperation, but to rectify the deficiencies in the present methods of cooperating. And metacognitive skills, according to many scholars around which because he is a very nuanced, a very well-known psychologist and linguist, Russian psychologist and linguist. He proposed the ZPP, and the ZPP is the focus area of language specialists, I think, mostly in present ever-known PhD.
How do you reconcile that, for instance, key groups, those 8 levels of intelligence, multiple intelligence that he speaks of? Would you say that this idea of competition within the classroom team-based learning can also accommodate those 8 intelligences?
For sure, why not? It facilitates those intelligences. When they gather together, competition is intended as a key, as a motivation. We motivate them to compete, to work against each other, to encourage them for more cooperation with the team members, so they do not go in contradiction. They facilitate each other. Competition is a means through which we encourage students to cooperate for more accuracy, more enthusiasm. That's all.
This is the first thesis in the history of our department that comes as a language teaching related thesis.
I will ask you, what is the limitation or disadvantage or advantage of cooperative learning methods and competitive learning methods? Can we elaborate very briefly?
Yeah, most important of all, in the present cooperative team-based learning methods, individual accountability of members is ignored. You know, when individual is not feeling responsible, he abdicates his responsibility or he tries to each part on the work of others. In my method, I have tried to compensate this deficiency. This is the most important deficiency in the present methods of cooperative.
And he has also put that there is no crushing of other students. You don't win even in competitive corporate learning at the cost of other students. By facilitating them also to scaffold and learn, you also come up and you may score better, but you don't crush others. That is the spirit of cooperative learning. The team-based, even competitive cooperative learning that he is trying to put in.
So what about your recommendation about cooperative learning and competitive learning?
For example, I mentioned here, in competitive team-based learning, we encourage best students to try to get their poorer students, and if they succeed to pass the course, they will be awarded with the highest mark. This is, for example, a award for them. And this way, they are encouraged to help their team members, and this way, the results will be significant.
How do you inject competition in it? Suppose you are supervising the learning group and you tell them to compete, at the same time you tell them to cooperate. How do you compete this?
It is a very good question. Through the grading system. In competitive team-based learning, we have a special grading system that if Team A, for example, prove significant over other teams, they will get the highest marks, all team members. I announced the class that the first three teams in the class will get the highest marks in the class. So every team is motivated to prove his superiority over other teams in the class. So through the grading system, we inject competition in cooperative learning schemes.
He adds one, he prefixes the adjective healthy competition.
Collaboration, which we expect traditionally in the classroom. And this cooperation, you have
Collaboration and cooperation of the same. But we have collaboration.
as a methodology.
As a method, we have cooperation, cooperative learning, and collaborative learning. Cooperative learning, the difference is that cooperative learning is more like a structure. But in collaborative learning, students are not lead. The teacher lets them do whatever they wish. The teacher lets them decide on the textbooks and on making teams, everything. That's the difference.
Is it more effective? Or he said,
I have not got it for sure, because cooperative learning is more structured. As I said, it is a highly structured, sociologically and psychologically based techniques which influence both cognitive. In traditional methods, we emphasize on cognitive aspects of learning, such as inside behavior, direct method, and cognitive aspects. But in collaboration, in cooperative learning methods, we also consider affective aspects of learning. That is, we think that attitudes of the students towards the teacher and towards the learning environment is very important. If the attitudes are negative, if you are a full professor, you will not succeed most of the time. So, in cooperative learning, we consider both cognitive and affective aspects of learning, and we try to emphasize on active participation of all team members. We have special strategies to motivate every individual to participate in the process. So these are the minor differences between cooperative learning and collaborative.
you have made a comparative study of the learning
What is the very first? Difference between as it was as a researcher, I found that the results of this research showed that Iranian students are more towards the cooperative learning, but in India, which adhere to the principles inherent in the competitive team-based learning, that is, they like competition. When they are compared to Iranian students, they seem to be in favor of competition rather than cooperation. They like competition and cooperative in the area of cooperative learning methods. They love to compete while against each other. This was the line of the difference between Iranian and Indian students. What was the reason? When we went through the results of the study, the statistics brought this result into the light. Of course, we had an attitude questionnaire. In the attitudes, they showed the same. They showed more significant and more positive attitudes towards competitive team-based learning. But if you want, they showed more significant attitudes towards cooperative team-based learning. And the results of the thesis showed the same. They were in parallel.
Also received do the engineering students have to study English language and do the masters show the performance of the students in English in Iran?
They have to study English, but it is not like India. You know, the difference is...
No, that's it. Here, for example, engineering students, now you see they have to take up the English as a subject, but it is is what you see shown on the master. That is, their performance is certainly not important. Don't you think it makes a big difference to see in your selection of the samples?
In Iran, we have the same situation, but the difference is there. In India, English is considered as the second language, but in Iran, it is considered as the foreign language.
No, whether it is a foreign language or a second language.
We have the same situation.
But in one case, you have received the language also contributing to the performance on paper, that is to say on the master.
Yeah, okay.
If it fails in English, will it get it in English?
No, he's not able to do this degree. He should compensate.
He can, yes. An engineering student, he doesn't have to take an examination to pass here in English. Whether he fails or passes, it's immediately he is going to get his degree in engineering. So it makes a considerable difference to see in the...
This is the case. This is the difference. In Iran, if they fail, they have to try again.
Then how do you count these two as a parameter for the
As I have posted in my thesis, we have to ignore these differences. It's not important for us English in Iran is considered as a sacred foreign language or in India is considered as a foreign language. The important thing is that we are teaching the subject through English in both the countries, in all the classes. I was a teacher in all the classes, both in Iran and in India, and we taught the bias through English. That's all. And we try to compare the results of just these classes.
Professor, an answer is very related to exactly what Farad has been hammering, and is very valid.
It was raised by Martin in the class.
Professor Ramchandra is also asking this. What extraordinary variation is there? No, these are all nomenclatures. Nomenclature saying that EFL or SL. This is booking. What is the practical experience and difference between Iran considering learning English as EFL and India considering language learning as a second language? Now you seem to say that they are only theoretical, there is no difference. In that case, why should we speak about Iran as EFL and India as say it as a second language? Now the difference is not that. The difference is not that. The difference is in Iran, it is a kind of foreign language. When it is said as foreign language, it is not that mandatory. There is a third level of importance given to English language. Whereas when we insist here, language is second language, I'm not sure that the engineering students can go without passing.
No, they can.
They can, okay. But in all of the disciplines, for instance, in our humanities, they have to pass. If they have to pass the language, unless they will not be given the degree. Therefore, the gradation as the benchmarking for the measuring the proficiency of the student has to be certified. To that extent, we give so much importance to English language as a second language, which is not the case in India.
There is a lot of difference between science students approaching English language, English as a language, and the BA students approaching English as a language. I was a science student and English classes were not classes for us.
I would like to, no, I am not a language man. Because you are thinking of competition. Actually, you have taken up, you see, for study groups from engineering colleges. Where you see already the competition level is rather assumed. They come there, you are not selected other groups. They are engineering students, and I don't know, they may be also differences between the two groups, you see, Iran and the Indian competitive. Because you seem to prescribe, you see, one administer, you see, one methodology for the requirement, you see, competition as you see for Indian students, but more of cooperation, at least in each stage for the Iran students. You can see the difference is there. Now, when you have selected samples like that, you seem to assume, you see, that the competitive level of competitiveness is the same. Now that was actually the question, see, how do you assume it to be the same? That was the question earlier. And the question has once again recurred, see, in the examiner's report, which means that the status of the answer perhaps has not altered now.
Oh, we have some differences, as I said, but minor differences. In India, students show more preference towards competitive team is competition. But in Iran, there is a bit more on cooperation. So we can teach us in India to practice competitive team-based learning and for athletes. They have some of the strategies for class management, especially for large places. But in Iran, we can teach us to begin from those methods to focus on pure cooperation. And later stages go through methods to prioritize the significance of competition in the area of cooperative.
Okay, so you can go to the more simpler, why did you select engineering?
Just randomly. We had a number of courses in Iran and randomly we decided on a job restoration. And Bashar was just randomly. Because the design of the city was randomized British process control design. Based on the blueprint of the position, we had no option but to select the classes for the groups randomly.
When you select this group, you cannot have dilemmas as to what sort of random. You see, we go to this group or that group, how much of exercise the same?
No, we have this is a procedure, it's not a series. We have a procedure. We should adhere to those. That's why you're supposed to have selected law students, senior students, just randomly. If I had selected law students which have raised the question why you selected someone. I selected several students because of the blueprint of the city. In statistics is science. When we go through the statistics, they give us the formula. Based on that formula, we should shape our thesis. The formula was pretest, randomized pretest process control pretest. We have to adhere to that formula. Otherwise, we will fail.
There was See, your conclusion is that you are recommending the competitive based learning for students here. Now this conclusion was already there. The danger of the conclusion being already there because you have selected. You have selected a group. Somebody comes to you to say, this student population complex is such a vast one. How you see a minority is there in engineering colleges where they are already trained to be competitive. You know what I'm saying? Psychologically, they are more competitive. Engineering students are much more competitive than the other students. It's already there. And you are recommending to a group, you see, which is very receptive to competition. Now, this is why I related it to Professor Madhav's question and to the
at the initial stages, we didn't know whether the students in Mohammed Hassan were towards cooperation or competition. That was the research. We have to experience, and then based on the results of the experience, we have to go to the conclusion. Competitive team experience, for the first time that is introduced to the world, we have no such method. That is the first time I have been introduced such a method, such a structure.
But you are describing it to all the PhD.
No, what I'm suggesting, as I said, we have a number of limitations, 5, 6, 7 limitations in the thesis. So we, as a teacher, we are suggesting to the young teachers that based on the results, what are our discipline?
When Dr. Sunita and Madhav were together, we asked him to look into those aspects before he binds the thesis, before he submits the thesis. There was some limitation in this regard. His reading of the difficult level of scaffold learning of Indian students was very limited. He had better knowledge about his own country and he had clear material, but his assimilation took longer time. Therefore, certain assumptions that he had, whether to eliminate them, repeat to them, or defend to them, that he had a confusion till the end. But in the concluding chapter, he has clarified that in terms of minor differences, as he says. Against what is called the culture of power. But power was a too philosophical one for him to get into the assimilation of his mind. To that extent, that is the limitation that Professor Nagaraj speaks about vis-a-vis social goal and the meta-learning strategy.
I don't know whether this question has been asked, and I was not
Word and then you decide. Your question has.
No, you raise the question and then
See, here you said, here this method somewhat successful in India. Whereas in India, it is the competitive Indian method which is successful.
which has been discussed for our
Oh, that I don't
we have discussed this. Exactly. This is the question. And there's a new question you are raising, but that has been raised already. But the other question which you raised now ago in the pre-final case has also been discussed. Fortunately or unfortunately you are aware. So, fortunately, okay. Dr. Gurmani, so who is there around?
No, in Iran, whether there is a provision for students to pass their degrees, even in Persian language, the language which is considered to be official in Iran.
No, they have to pass even Persian language.
Is there any compulsory, on the spot on the students?
For sure, they want.
How is the pass percentage? Because I'm also worried. Now this I would like to compare with the Mafuzel students, their performance.
No, they are.
And it is very significant because your thesis is supposed to be recommending some remedial measures. So that becomes very significant, the core part of your thesis. The main difference between the Iranian, what kind of difficulties, hazards, faced by Iranian students and Indian students also. You need to have even at least, the tip of the iceberg. Maybe, it may not be possible for you to take in detail the difficulties of Indian students, but you should also be aware of the kind of difficulties faced by these students.
They have to pass at least 50% of the sources. We mark them from 1 to 20. If the student takes the 10, he passes the course.
That means he will not pass in all the subjects.
They have to pass all the subjects. Otherwise,
You have to have minimum marks in all the subjects, but with a certain percentage you can jump into the other grade. And there seems to be little difference between the rural students and the city students. And
unlike we have but we too don't have that, we don't have a different marking for rural students. No. We have the same.
No, they face more difficult.
Absolutely, absolutely. And therefore, what is the remedial measure that you put in for them? You see? Well, that's one reason we introduce language, more serious on language. Which has been our problem with our discussion and deliberations. Introduce more subjects related to, and I am sure most of the students will be happy with more papers on language. But there are differences on that. The MA level should be introduced more of language. And this is the first thesis in the history of our department that comes as a language teaching related thesis.